Was a pole that the two gentlemen face each other and they could turn this way. The pole would allow them to turn this way, and then they could turn the whole base this way. So you had 3 axes going. Real unfriendly rig, hurt again in the hips, made you sick to your stomach.
So it's like a really good carnival ride, and because there's 2 of us in it, it's a nice challenge to see who's going to quit first.
It became a game with them who was going to wimp out first on them, but they didn't like it. You know, it was not good. They were good for about 10 or 15 rotations at a time. Then it was a lot of eyes rolling back in their heads and, you know, trying to see who was going to keep their lunch down.
It's called the yak rig for one reason.
When it goes good, it feels good. When it doesn't go good, it doesn't feel good.
The Machine City actually, it's always been kind of referred to as like a coral reef or some kind of a foreign kind of a landscape that's just teeming with life.
It did sort of look like it was grown, and there's a sort of a hive, sort of a thing to it.
There were no miniatures. That was one of the interesting things about the job for us, is that normally, you know, with visual effects, you get like background plates, photographic plates you incorporate elements into. And I think that we had something less than a third of the shots that we did had either a foreground plate of the actors in a cockpit or a background plate in some cases with Neo walking down the tunnel into the Machine City. So, man, the amount of digital stuff we had to create was just outrageous.
What the boys always felt is that, you know, the most perfect forms in our world are insects. They're designed to move and be protected, and they're aerodynamically correct, that it can defend themselves. So most of the machine creatures are essentially insect-based.
But some of the things that were interesting is when we started using like particle systems to grow the city. You know, we would run these simulations, and the guys did a great job. Dan Rolonek did all these particle simulations that would sort of create city pieces that would grow buildings. Like we broke the buildings down into different types of buildings and different pieces of buildings. So you might have a base of a building and a tip of a building, and you could recombine those in different orders, and you could give different kind of growth patterns. Now.
The Logos crashes, he sort of crawls out of the Logos, and there's like a big kind of like funnel set, if you like, which sort of takes him to the Deus Ex Machina. There's several, different areas that we knew were going to be kind of exciting challenges, and the Deus was one of them.
What are you going to draw? What is it going to be? And I didn't want to think about it at all, because I thought this is going to be the hardest thing to draw in this movie, because it's the God machine. It had to be something that a human would recognize as, would have to be humanistic, so that, you know, Neo could relate to it, and the audience as well. And, you know, everybody thinks of God with the flowing white beard and all this, and I think that's what everybody thought it was going to do, something like that. And I thought I'd go in the opposite direction, and it's the face of a baby, which I thought was pretty horrific, because it's got this horrible urchin-y thing, and all of a sudden all these little robots come out, and they form like the most innocent thing that's possible.
We started out with the mechanics of it. The guy's like a big porcupine, or again, kind of an aquatic reference, like a big sea urchin, a spiny sea urchin. So we built the initial model with all these spikes everywhere and portals and such. At the same time, we had to work out kind of a performance basis for the guy, right? He was going to form a face. So first off, we went and shot a photographic reference of the director's nephew, Henry. We tried to get key expressions that the Deus would be going through. The parents were there, and they put the toy in front of him and then pull it away to try and get him to do some frowns. Finally got him to cry, which was some of the most appropriate reference that we got. And then the next step was to work with Kevin, one of the actors who was in Light of the Osiris, and we did motion capture sessions and having him go through the lines and generic poses, looking for, again, performance cues. And for the swarms, we took a lot of reference from schools of fish, basically sardines and whatnot, and also tried to mix in some kind of weird stuff like frequency-dependent, movement that you might see like in iron filings, magnetic fields, or also a field that's kind of loosely called cymatics, which is this idea of sort of visualizing different frequencies through like a lycopodium powder. And there's some pretty outrageous movement and stuff that you see in there. So we started to try to line up what our design elements are that we could use.
It is done.
And then I did the, I guess it's a garbage scow, at the end that transports Neo. It's a dinosaur. Imagine you get a dinosaur into the movie. It's like a sort of a triceratops kind of a thing. I just, I got a piece of paper and a pencil and I can come up with all this stuff, but they got to make it work, and they do.
The only way we got through it was by the talent and perseverance of the whole crew that was working on the show.
It's like it's very easy to get sort of jaded just looking at a little gray box all day long. Seeing rendered stuff really kind of kicks you back into reality. You're working on something that's going to be really cool when all the elements are stuck together.
Everybody put their back into it and just really kind of pulled miracles out of their pockets on a regular basis.
It's pretty mind-blowing just to see the amount of work that we were able to pull off of this thing.
The term bullet time is a dramatic convention that Andy and Larry made up. Bullet time is basically a mind over matrix moment where
we detach the time and space of the subject from the camera. You always know that you're doing something that is groundbreaking. If someone asks something that you go, maybe.
A lot of people in the visual effects industry, early on when they knew what we were doing for Matrix, thought we were crazy. Yeah, you're smart, but you're not that smart.
It's like a small idea that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and then finally becomes supernatural. It is just staggering.
Where we were in the mid-90s was attempting to create the illusion that a camera could move at subsonic speeds, a virtual-looking camera that had to be done in a very physically laborious way. We shot that test in a junkyard with a handful of still cameras that we bought locally. 120 cameras and 2 motion picture cameras set up.
It was photographic, it was two-dimensional, and really there was only one path that our camera could run because we had to plan it and lay out all these still cameras.
From that point, we have found ourselves making what we call today virtual cinema and virtual cinematography, which is where the camera is detached in its time and space from the subjects.
Still bullet time, and we move in and out of amazing moments, but the methods that we're using are completely different.
Virtual cinematography is a phrase that John coined. It's using real live photography elements, whether it be stills photographs or a piece of motion picture footage or high-def photography, and manipulating it inside a computer to be able to repurpose it and reformat it so you can see it from different angles, different camera speeds. It's kind of a digitization of the real world that then allows you to have a virtual camera that can fly anywhere in that scene.
The possibilities for slowing down the motion, speeding up the motion, and basically like throwing the camera wherever you want. It allows you to move the camera in ways that a real camera would by no means be able to move.
So it escalates way beyond first experiments in bullet time, because we really could get any angle on this action now. Infinite camera perspectives are available. A little shorter on the winch part, because it's really the waitress part of it, and a little longer on
the virtual human process is a combination of the motion capture and universal capture.
You're in the air, and here comes the flame, and in the back, you feel?
The real thing that we were very, very scared with at the beginning was how could you produce a rendition of your principal actors at a realistic enough level that you don't create a loss of belief from the audience. What we decided to do was build something that was based on analyzing a real performance.
Nothing will surpass the qualities that a random performance could give you from a real actor, real person.
We pretty much settled on the faces would be the hardest thing to recreate.
We decided to build this system, which we call Universal Capture System, which consists of 6 high-definition cameras and arranged around that actor's face.
If you filmed a real actor with film cameras or digital cameras, as it turned out to be, from enough angles, and were able to write some very clever sort of machine vision processing algorithms, you'll actually be able to produce a very realistic digitization of one of our actors.
And from that source material, we derive all moving dimensional models with all the texture associated with the face.
This is the sort of new and fun part of the process, a procedure known as motion capture.
The more of the real actor we can use, the better.
The stick figure really represents the bones inside of the character, and so the nice thing is that you can put that inside any character.
The scene that it's most applied to is the Burly Brawl, and the procedure for that was to figure out the master plan for the choreography, captured all these little components, and then composed.
For the Burly Brawl, because there were 350 Agent Smiths in one shot, there's no way you would be able to do it any other way. We pretty much had to do it as digital humans.
So looking at virtual Keanu, it is Keanu performing underneath that CG shell, and all of his training pays off for our material just as it does on film.
With many years of development and many people working very hard to try and get the essence of Hugo and Keanu into these digital characters.
At this point, nothing is real. This is all just computer graphic.
The backgrounds and the original bullet time stuff were done through a technique called image-based rendering, where we took still photographs of the sets that Owen Patterson built or some of the live-action environments, and we're able to reconstruct dimensionally what them sets were, so that we could then, inside the computer, produce a virtual fly-through.
What this means is we take photographs and we project them onto geometry, which allows us to create 3D environments.
It's possible for somebody to build a set, like Owen Patterson, to design and build a set, and we can go and photograph it and recreate it exactly inside the computer. So we can pretty much match Bill's lighting and Bill's photographic look. That really is the essence of virtual cinematography.
For Trinity Falls and Reloaded, specific buildings in Sydney have been selected to be the environment, and so those have been all photographed.
All the way down. It doesn't involve us completely making synthetic creations in the computer. We still need a real set, real lighting, and real photography to get it to work, because it actually gives a very realistic look to the movie.
It's amazing what you got to do just to get the rudimentary components as a starting place, the canvas, to put the other elements on. So today we're going to get our endless megacity sprawl.
Megacity is based on tons and tons and tons and tons of photographs of Sydney, Australia. Sydney, Australia isn't necessarily the look of the Matrix, so we had to repurpose a lot of it and extend buildings, change color palettes, make them look a little bit more interesting. And that was done by our map painting department and our virtual background department.
We created buildings based on the photos, but extended them to 100 stories, sometimes 200 stories tall buildings.
We see Megacity at its grandest in the Superfight. It's an excellent combination of virtual backgrounds, map painting, and synthetic characters.
The number one obstacle for doing flying successfully was weightlessness and the feeling that you were not encumbered by gravity and the physical constraints that doing rigs on sets brings you. So we had a blue screen shoot that involved special rigs, and then at the same time we begun animation of the other superhero human flying shots.
A lot of things that we're doing is taking a lot of wire stunts and making them look like they're not on wires. Kind of like digital wire removal in the CG world. And also stuff
that's like impossible to capture, we would just go in and hand animate it.
With hand animation, it does get a much more fluid look. Really gets a performance that you can nail down to the millimeter. In the Super Fi, 70% of the rain that you see is synthetic computer-generated rain.
Integrating computer graphic rain with real rain and different layers deep of both.
It took us a long time to get the rain system to match the live action, to the point that we could actually insert in the middle synthetic rain. The wet look for the characters was quite a challenge. Our cloth department not only excelled at producing a really kick-ass looking dynamic for wet clothing for Neo and for Smith, but also were able to produce really excellent looking water spray that every time they fight or hit each other, spray goes flying off.
A lot of technology being arrayed to basically understand the water, how it really works in the real world, and then how to stylize it. How about really hard?
Action!
The punch is the definitive blow delivered by Neo. We're looking to really amp up the drama of a fist, and it will be smashing through rain that's nearly suspended, and the rain will smash off in a zero GE way. So we're basically going to cover it virtually with a computer graphic fist seen with somewhat of a vertigo camera lensing to create a real sense of enormous mass.
This sequence is one of the biggest visual effects sequences in the movie. Blue screens, CG rain, actual CG digital Neo and Smith characters. This has everything thrown in.
It's just a logical extension of the whole notion of CGI.
Larry and Eddie will take risks. They kind of pushed us into reaching them extra limits. It's not a question that you may want to do it or you can't do it, you have to do it.
Filmmaking in general has now this new tool,
which I believe allows directors and writers and cinematographers to transcend all of the physical boundaries that are placed upon us by shooting here in the everyday world. It liberates the filmmaker in ways that they never have been before. And that is a pretty long stretch in that time frame.
Right now, I'm making concrete pipes for blowing up. Pretty much that's what we make most of our stuff for, is blowing stuff up.
Every time you see a spaceship crash into the ground, be it in, Planet of the Apes or Independence Day, it's a miniature.
The scale of this is massive. And to get that scale and debris and fire and everything, nothing can compete with a miniature.
Things that would be destroyed or be huge event locations where things would just shatter.
CG is not really too great on doing stuff like explosions, interaction of stuff actually hitting, matching, and debris coming off. So that's the stuff that really sort of happens here.
There's just a lot of serendipity or randomness that happens.
We can pick up a lot of that detail that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get. And so, trying to get that extra little bit of realism into our CG city.
Seems like the person's probably just about this tall.
When they say you're going to work on the model unit, you imagine these tiny little models, little figures, and
Then you realize when you arrive that, you know, either something that's in 10th scale or 3rd scale or 5th scale is still huge.
Technically, it is a miniature, even though that ship is close to a ton.
They're the biggest miniatures you've ever seen. They don't look like miniatures at all. They look like live action sets.
The studio started calling bigatures because, like the dock doors, even though it's 10th scale, is really 30 feet high and 40 feet wide.
Why aren't we building this even, you know, half this scale? It's because we have explosions and fire, and you can't change the size of fire.
Ready and action!
On this film, we pretty much started out with the digger, which is our key actors, our players in this. We built part of a 5th scale digger and a 10th scale digger.
They built a shape of the finished digger, essentially, but with absolutely no features on it whatsoever, but very heavy. It weighed a couple of 100 pounds, I think, and so they could drop it in a controlled manner into the specially constructed 1 to 10 scale pipes.
This is going to be where the digger plunges into the lower dock set. These pipes are pyrosil and aluminum, and they're going to crush down to simulate real pipe. Should be good.
Right, but you want the pyro coming inside the pipes, though.
Yeah, inside the catwalk.
It was difficult to build these complex environments and make all of the reactions happen properly. That the explosions, the pipes that would flip up into frame, the debris that would fall, tried to capture as much of that as possible.
Action!
This project I have right now, we're taking miniature Sentinels, I call them baby Sentinels, and we're destroying them. They're the dead Sentinels that'll be placed on one of the crash sets.
And those Sentinels have been used for a dropping sequence. What looks like a great big pile of seaweed. It's a fantastic effect.
They are evil little creatures, but the bad guys are always so much neater, so I like working with the bad guys.
A lot of the miniatures, again, have to do with interaction. In the case of the dock, you have a control tower up there that topples down during the battle, and that will be built in miniature just for that purpose.
The hamburger is an extension of what we built in Australia.
They built like the top 20 feet of this in live action, and we've built everything above that. And this tower will be in a giant room that'll be generated in computer graphics.
Primarily, it's for where they need to go really close so that you don't have to go and render the whole thing out for that.
There's a lot of fine detail surface area on this one.
They'll build all the core structures out of wood and steel. It's got to be steel because they're going to be crashing this crane over the side of this tower.
This is the crane. This goes up on top, and this thing could spin all the way around.
Even at 10th scale, it's an extremely large model. To do the motion control photography on it, we had to build a motion control crane. That's one of the largest motion control cranes in the world.
We finished weighing, and it weighs 5,100 pounds, the whole model. And the crane top that's going to fall is 800 pounds, which is scary and exciting all at the same time.
That tower has been absolutely beautifully designed, and now we're going to see it destroyed.
The ship will pass right through all of this acrylic, which will represent the deck, and it will just bust into 1,000,000 pieces, hopefully. Or 1,000 pieces.
Unless we make it too strong, and then the ship's going to stop.
So this is what we came up with for the finale of the Mjolnir into Zion to save the day.
The Mjolnir, I put these scales on it, or these big metal plates. That gives extra detail because these plates that you can like break chunks off, like it broke, skidded against something.
The actual doors.
Yes.
Yeah, I think each one is like 3,500 pounds.
The gate, we must have the biggest gate. We need this gigantic mechanical, machinery-driven gate.
This door behind me was the biggest roll aid shot for me. It had the most possibilities for absolute failure.
And then when that thing's traveling down the track, we did a test yesterday, it's like a car just flying down the road. It's pretty freaky.
Yeah. This is probably one of our largest events.
The ship weighed about a ton. It had to go pretty fast. It had to make a turn. And then while it was making the turn and squeaking through the door and blowing up, it was dropping and rolling, and the nose was sliding over. So this was a pretty big deal.
We have 5 cameras, and it takes us days to set up these shots. We're all a little nervous if we're not sure whether it's gonna be right enough. We're crossing our fingers.
There are so many things that can be achieved by having the background into which they can put a digger or whatever it might be. They start off with a basis and then they can add to it.
Computer graphics and the miniatures are actually integrated into every shot. So you'll have CG models, you'll have hand-built models, you'll have computer graphic pyro layered on top of real pyro, and ideally the blend will be seamless.
Like taking the old-fashioned way of movies and blending it with the most modern way of doing movies and trying to get the best elements out of each.
Well now, ain't this a surprise?
Just how long do you think this peace is going to last?
As long as it can. What about the others?
What others?
The ones that want out.
Obviously, they will be freed.
I have your word.
What do you think I am? Human?
Matrix Online is a continuation of the Matrix stories. When the third movie comes to an end, the Matrix Online literally picks it up from that moment on and goes forward with it.
Through the course of the game, you will have story unfold before you. It's not just a depiction of the Matrix as it was in the films, it's the continuing story of what happens in the Matrix.
So that players can see it's fully open-ended. They don't know where the story goes at all.
We now, as players, can participate in the overall story and help to propel it forward.
Action! The plan for The Matrix was always to tell a story in multiple mediums. That was the Wachowski brothers, their first thought when we decided to continue the story after the first Matrix.
Larry and Andy are overseeing and contributing to that continuing storyline.
They wanted to be able to take their movies and instead of having a conclusion that was sealed forever, to have a world that the fans could all come to, that they could actually become a part of the Matrix story that they had already enjoyed.
They already had a vision for their, universe to be depicted inside the computer space, and they had very specific concerns that it needed to live up to a particular standard that they had set.
I'm mainly known for my comic book work, especially my character Concrete. After I'd done 3 comic strips for the Matrix website, they gave me a call. It was actually a little mysterious at first. I didn't even know what the project was, except it involved writing. But it turned out, no, it was this fairly new genre of massive multiplayer online games.
A massively multiplayer game is a simulation where thousands of people participate in a shared experience, and they all connect to the same server.
Once they create the world and the people, then the players themselves have to really create the story and follow through on the idea. But the boys helped create the world and placed it in that world, and now the players can take it from there.
It's more like a stage that's being built through which, many stories can be told. By giving Paul and the Wachowski brothers maximum flexibility, we're trying to create a situation where players can experience that story in a way that's different from, a typical movie or book or even a single-player game experience.
So when you start the game, you're still one of the people in the farms who's just come to the realization that the entire Matrix is in fact a simulation.
You're going to be presented with the option of taking the blue pill or the red pill, which of course you've taken the red.
The humans are still just as passionate, and they hate the machine civilization just as much, but also know that there's only a truce that's keeping them alive.
This will feel a little weird.
You then start to define your residual self-image. You're selecting your clothes, your hair, what you look like. Are you male? Are you female? What your skills are. You can be a spy. You can be a hacker. Or you can be the equivalent of a fighter, a soldier.
And then you become a new operative inside the Matrix. And immediately these forces, the machines, the humans, the various exiles will begin approaching you and trying to hire you to win over your allegiance to their cause.
It's a very complicated clash. It's not just humans versus machines, and as a player you'll have to make your choices of whom you ally yourself with. We'll see characters from the film. They'll be in the game with you.
They're still running their agendas. They're still trying to accomplish their goals as depicted in the films. They may even try to recruit you to work for them. You may be recruited by somebody else who wants you to specifically stop what they are doing.
You'll have to really work to meet them in person. And if you are a good enough player, you'll be able to talk with them.
You'll have to prove yourself worthy. To meet one of these characters from the film will be a monumental task, something that people will be able to brag about.
We have constructed Mega City.
The environment is a vast city where you can wander the streets, you can open doors, you can go through every floor of every building. And there's a lot to find there, and a lot of people who may want to kill you.
The megacity's infinite. It spreads out in all directions. We've tried to capture segments of the megacity. There is the slums environment in the international district, and then downtown and industrial districts.
In terms of just raw square footage of game space to explore, there currently is no equal, and I don't think there will be one for a while. A city is a very organic and dynamic place, and if you're going to capture megacity as depicted in the Matrix, you're going to need to provide a rich level of detail, ranging from characters and items and things down to cockroaches and pigeons and trash on the ground.
We have custom-built tools that we have constructed in order to vary a particular landscape so that it doesn't look the same anymore.
You suddenly will have this sense that you're really in a living and expanding environment.
In a city environment, it's only natural that people start to congregate. If people are moving to different areas inside the game and mass droves, we really had to make sure that our architecture was such that it could handle 100 people rushing to one building for whatever reasons.
Our challenge was to go and design a system that would allow tens of thousands of users to play simultaneously in a game world, so that we would have the option of running up very much larger numbers of people than typically exist on a single MMO server system.
We wanted to not only have an enormous world that you could move seamlessly from one area of the city to another, but to move seamlessly from indoor to outdoor, to be able to run up a flight of stairs, take an elevator, come out onto a rooftop, and see the area that you just left seamlessly without load zones.
This is a brand new server in order to be able to deal with latency issues. At the same time, the user doesn't get a feeling of lag when they're under high lag conditions.
That was a big design goal, to make sure that our hardware could handle those types of things.
We have a team whose sole job after the Matrix ships is to continuously add more content to the game. It's just never going to stop.
There are events that will happen each month, and we'll be telling the story both in short movies and gameplay.